quotes, infused with the scent of potpourri, films we commit to memory. Crossing the felt ropes, watching from home on my TV, looking at all my eyes can see. They tell me I view obsessively.
Hello and welcome to The Obsessive Viewer. We're a movie and TV podcast that covers a specific topic, be it genre, trope, movie, or show each episode. You can find more of our work at ObsessiveViewer.com, and while every episode will always be free, if you'd like to support what we do here, you can become a patron at patreon.com/ObsessiveViewer for tons of bonus audio content, including TV and book reviews, immediate reaction movie reviews, Patreon potpourri episodes, movie commentary tracks, and much more. In addition to that, I'll give a whole spiel about Patreon as well, but in addition to that, there's a new shop feature basically. So go to obsessiveviewer.com/Patreon for more information. I'm your host, Matt Hurt, and you can find me on social media, including Letterboxd at Obsessive Viewer, and on TikToks, where I'm doing on the TikTok machine, where I'm doing mostly book talk reviews and everything. So that's my username on there is OV Podcasts. But today on the show, we're going to be reviewing the new Brian Duffield sci-fi horror movie on Hulu called No One Will Save You, starring Caitlin Dever. It's a home invasion thriller about aliens. So that'll be very exciting. We're going to do that in a non-spoiler and spoiler review. And in doing that, we are going to, or joining me to do that is, of course, Tiny. There we go. Hi, Tiny. How's it going?
Hey, buddy. It's going really good.
Good. Are you excited to talk No One Will Save You?
I am excited.
Nice. Yeah, I'm very curious what you thought of it. And we'll get into that. But I do want to kind of highlight a new feature on Patreon. So, Patreon is a subscription-based premium stuff or whatever. So we have different tiers on Patreon. So if you go to patreon.com/obsessiveviewer, you can sign up at different reward tiers. So we have a $2 tier that gets you access to immediate movie reviews, immediate or TV reaction recordings, and book reviews. If you bump up to like the $5 level, you get all of that plus movie commentary tracks and Patreon potpourri episodes, which are full-length episodes that I do mostly during awards season. And then $10 gets you that plus like audio test recordings and monthly wrap-up recordings I need to get back into doing because it's been several months since I've done that. But you get a lot of content on Patreon. But Patreon has a new thing where you can create a shop. So that's what I've done, and I'm going to be adding more stuff to it. So if you don't want to do a subscription to Patreon and you just want to directly buy content from us, you can do that at patreon.com/obsessiveviewer/shop, or you can go to obsessiveviewer.com/Patreon. I'll put a whole bunch of links in the show notes of this episode. But basically, right now, as of this recording, there's a bunch of Stephen King read-along review stuff on there. So I did like a 5-part read-along review of Night Shift, his short story collection, a 6-part episode or a 6-part read-along review of Nightmares and Dreamscapes, Skeleton Crew, and then I also did Billy Summers' Fairy Tale, the whole Bill Hodges trilogy, The Outsider, and If It Bleeds. And as of this coming Sunday, I will have finished my read-along review of Holly. So all of that's going to be on the Patreon shop. You can buy those a la carte, and basically you pay directly to Patreon. They get a cut, I get the money, and then you get the files forever. So anyway, check that out. Go to obsessiveviewer.com/Patreon. Okay. So the hard sell has been hard sold. So Tiny, what's up? Do you want to give me a hand and pull me out of this little grave I've dug for myself of self-promotion?
Yeah, I am doing really good. Today we're talking about No One Will Save You on Hulu.
Yes, and we're going to get right into it, basically. So we're going to do a non-spoiler review and spoiler review. This is a very unique horror sci-fi thriller that I have some issues with and stuff that I'll have to work out and everything as we review it. But I will say also, to get back to the Patreon thing, I have immediate movie reactions on there as well. So anytime I watch like a new release movie, I record my immediate thoughts on it. I did an episode for No One Will Save You, and I looked, and that was my 30th immediate reaction recording of the year, of like 30. So
Damn.
yeah, I was gonna say I need a life, but this is my life. So so yeah, but anyway, so I started working out my thoughts on this movie on that, but I'll further get into it in our review. So yeah, so I'm excited to talk to you about it, Tiny, because you are notoriously a person who has feelings about alien invasions, about alien abductions, and horror with alien spins on them. So
yes,
yeah. So like when I pitched the idea of reviewing it on the show, I remember you saying that you were definitely all for it because you saw the trailer and it gave you nightmares. So we're going to get into our review now. And I definitely want to get your feelings on your expectations of it and your kind of overall feelings on it. But before I do that, obviously, just to give the whole spiel, it was written and directed by Brian Duffield. It stars Caitlin Dever, and the plot summary, courtesy of IMDb, is an exiled, anxiety-ridden homebody must battle an alien who's found its way into her home. And once again, this is on Hulu. It was released on September 22nd. So, Tiny, what were your expectations going in, and how did you feel about the movie overall in non-spoilers?
Well, I had some sort of muddled expectations, I guess you could say, because that was based solely on the trailer. And I was proud of myself. I'd actually heard about the movie before you mentioned it to me.
Nice.
Because my relationship to movies has just changed so much. I'm just not watching them. I'm just not. This is spoiler alert for the end of the year. This is going to be my worst year for movies ever.
Oh, wow.
And that's a bummer, but at the same time, like things are changing for me. But but this was great. I'm really glad I watched it, and I saw the trailer. I'm on Hulu a lot because that's what we use to watch sports and stuff. And,
right.
It's football season and NASCAR and racing still going on and all that. So yeah, this popped up on my radar, and I was instantly, with the alien thing, I was like, okay, I need to watch this trailer. And then after the trailer, I was like, I gotta watch that movie and be terrified to death of it. So the trailer really hooked me in because I thought, it takes the trailer, as trailers are wont to do, takes some of the most intense, crazy parts of the movie and weaves them together in a trailer style. And I was just like, this looks bananas, scary, wicked, and that's how I felt like the first half. And then it kind of, I can see that like the movie kind of amps up a little bit, and it gets away from the mystery of what the alien and the creature looks like and what it's doing there and all that. And it seems a little more surface level and a little less mysterious, and I think that takes away a lot of the horror of it. So I was like, I feel like it's going to start really well, and it's going to be pretty nuts and scary and cool and well done. And then it might just kind of get a little over the top or be a little bit too on the nose. I kind of had that expectation from the trailer anyways. It felt like kind of like a chase 'em up kind of horror movie by the end of the trailer, and I was like, I don't know if I'm as much into that from an alien abduction or an alien invasion standpoint. So yeah, I kind of had mixed, muddled expectations going in. My reaction to it, my overall thoughts are pretty positive, actually. I think this is obviously a subgenre all its own. Alien invasion or alien abduction horror is a very a very tapped into subgenre. And there's some good examples, there's some bad examples. But I think parts of this movie are a little derivative, not particularly original or impressive, but then other parts I think are brilliant. Like the opening act of this movie is so intense, and just I was like on the edge of my seat, and I was like, I'd be dead. I would die of fear and just I would die. Like I would think I would go into shock if this was me. I'll go into details on it later when we're in spoilers, but I was so impressed by the camera work, Caitlin Deaver's acting, the choreography of how all of it was woven together. The design of the alien and the creature was really cool. It was both kind of a classic design, but they totally spun it into their own thing and made it sort of a newer, kind of made it their own version of an alien. And I thought it was really well done. So those are a lot of the good things. And then it does kind of go, not avoiding spoilers, but it does kind of go in a different direction, or it gets a little more, it gets much more on the nose, and it does kind of do what I thought it was going to do. And it's not that it turns out to be a bad movie or it has a bad ending. I think there's still a lot for the movie to hang its hat on, but it sort of turns into not as scary and not as unique of a movie. And I think it kind of gets away from itself a little bit. And there's some other issues, but ultimately I really appreciated the creativity and the way they really went for it in this movie. I mean, Brian Duffield both wrote and directed it, so I think this is truly his vision, and he, I think he had a clear, concise vision, and he stuck to it. And I really respect the movie for that, despite its issues.
Well said. I think I'm going to come down quite a bit harder on it than you, which is interesting because you rated it 3 stars on Letterboxd. I rated it 2.5.
Yeah.
Which
I was trying
is
to be realistic, I think.
Yeah, and like with me, I feel like I'm still kind of working through a little bit about it. I did have like some pretty big sticking points that are more things that I brought to the movie than anything else, and namely it is at times very original, but it's also kind of piggybacking off of its influences. And I'll talk more in depth about that and everything, but my expectations were relatively well managed. I had seen the trailer once, I was interested in it, and then I figured that we needed an episode. So like it had been a while. So I was excited to watch it. And then and this is something that signaled to me, like I wasn't aware that it was going to be a full on, I didn't know what the gimmick was. Like I did not know that there was a gimmick built into it in terms of, I think it's okay to say that there's little to no dialogue in this movie. And I wasn't aware that was going to be the case until I saw a tweet from one of our favorite people, obviously, Stephen King. Stephen King is obviously someone who watches a lot of stuff and everything, so he'll comment on it and everything. So he said, "No one will save you. Brilliant, daring, involving, scary. You have to go back over 60 years to a Twilight Zone episode called The Invaders to find anything remotely like it. Truly unique." And yes, so and then I entered my pick me era and quote tweeted him. He did not respond, but I quote tweeted him and said, "Of course, listen to King and don't sleep on The Invaders, or any Twilight Zone for that matter. By the way, check out my podcast, Anthology. But also check out his wonderful Battleground short story in Night Shift and its adaptation in TNT's Nightmares and Dreamscapes. Both pay loving and unique tribute to The Invaders." So it's something I've talked about endlessly, both on Patreon and on Tower Junkies, but in Stephen King's 79 short story collection, Night Shift, there is a short story called Battleground. And that short story is a direct homage to that episode of the Twilight Zone, The Invaders. The Invaders is about a woman alone in a house who is invaded upon by miniature aliens that attack her. Battleground is King paying tribute to that episode by making a story about a hitman who is in this penthouse, who one of his enemies has delivered a package to him, and the package is a bunch of toy soldiers that come to life and attack him. So very similar to that. And then I'll I'll get to my thoughts on the movie and everything, but I just wanted to get through this little like preamble. But in Nightmares and Dreamscapes, the like limited series anthology show based on a bunch of Stephen King stories, that story was adapted starring William Hurt, and was adapted by Richard Christian Matheson, who was the son of the writer of that episode of The Twilight Zone. And what I find, and it's such a fascinating thing to me, because Stephen King wrote Battleground clearly as an homage to The Invaders. And The Invaders starred Agnes Moorehead, and what was notable about that episode is that there is no dialogue. It is completely, like, it is just her reacting to things, because she doesn't speak until, like, we don't get any dialogue in that episode until the end of the episode, which it has a classic Twilight Zone twist to it. And it's great. It's fantastic. Then, when Battleground was adapted into Nightmares and Dreamscapes, Richard Matheson's son directed it, and they made the choice to make that episode have no dialogue in it. And I thought that was beautiful. That was fantastic. And so now we're in 2023, and now we have this movie, and No One Will Save You is about a woman who is descended upon by an alien invasion. She's fighting off an alien invasion and everything, and there is little to no dialogue. And it's clearly an aesthetic choice, and it is clearly something that is done to pay homage to what came before it, and particularly to that episode of The Twilight Zone. So one of my main sticking points for this movie was that I thought that first act, the first half hour of the movie, is very interesting and very effective at carrying on that sense of suspense and terror, and utilizing that gimmick very, very well. And I say gimmick as not necessarily as a pejorative, but it becomes kind of a sticking point for me, and it becomes a bit of a pejorative, because after about 30 minutes, I was in my head realizing that there's a reason why that worked in The Twilight Zone and why it worked in Nightmares and Dreamscapes. Both are like 22-minute episodes. I think Nightmares and Dreamscapes was actually like 40 minutes, but they are of a considerably shorter length than a feature-length film. And what became abundantly clear to me is that the movie felt like it was creating scenarios to basically prioritize that gimmick as opposed to organically creating good story around it. Like it was prioritizing the gimmick of having a basically dialogueless movie instead of prioritizing how to tell the story that it was telling. And that made the second, third, and the third, the remainder of the movie, to be a huge slog for me. And it really felt a little bit, laboring at that point. So, I did appreciate the home invasion aspect of it, the way that the tension is communicated through the camera work, through like the creaks of the house, the reveals of the aliens and how they operate and everything is really interesting. But I kept getting just kind of irritated about the whole like gimmicky side of the movie. And I have thoughts about the aliens and everything as well, but I'll save that for in a bit. But it just it didn't work for me as well as I was really hoping that it would, based on the trailer and the fact that it was setting itself out to be what I think could have been a loving tribute to one of the iconic episodes of The Twilight Zone. And I just think it really fell short of that, especially after the first 30 or 40 minutes of it.
Yeah, that's totally fair. I agree. I think the whole no dialogue thing, I agree. I think gimmick can be, I liked what you said, where gimmick doesn't have to be a pejorative term. Like it can be a fun thing, right? But I fully agree with you as well that it turned into a hindrance on the movie. There's a point where it became unrealistic, or it became just ridiculous, frankly.
Yeah.
Like it just didn't make sense for what was going on.
Yeah. Are you referring to a very specific scene? Or
yes.
just, okay. Yeah, I think I know exactly what you're talking about.
And from that point, that's about the midpoint of the movie. And from that point forward, the lack of dialogue bothered me. And I think the idea of using it, especially in the first act, which is the home invasion part that you see in the trailer, that's the first act, which I think, like, if we were just rating that, like if it were a short movie, I seriously, that'd be like 4.5 stars out of 5 for me.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, I was amazed by that. But from there, it was, I don't want to say it was all downhill, because there's stuff I liked in the other acts, the second and third acts as well. But it's a shame. It's a shame because they had a third of a movie that was fantastic, and the other 2/3 they're okay. I mean, they're fine. But yeah, I agree. I think the whole dialogue thing just it wasn't necessary. Like, I think it's a tool you can use, but you don't have to build an entire movie around it. You know, it made me think of, like, I don't even remember what it was called. The Oscar winning movie, the silent movie. It was like 2011.
The Artist?
The Artist.
Okay,
yeah. Like, that wasn't, like, that movie was cool and I liked it, but it was like they made silent movies silent because they didn't have the technology. Like, everyone who was making a silent movie in 1919 was making it silent because audio capturing technology didn't exist. Like, it was, they had to be creative despite that. And, like, that, I don't know. I'm not saying you can't make a silent movie anymore, but that's what bothered me about The Artist, is it was like, I don't know. It felt like a negative gimmick to kind of follow your logic or your points earlier. And that's what it felt like in this too. Like they were just using no dialogue for the sake of using no dialogue, or for the sake of saying they did it. And that's not creative, in my opinion. That's just, it took away from the creativity, is the best way I can say it, I guess.
I wholeheartedly agree. And one of the biggest issues I had with that, with them going full bore into that whole idea of, like, having it be no dialogue, is that a considerable, like, the emotional crux of the movie is trauma in Caitlin Deaver's character's backstory, her history, and it's hinted at very, very subtly, not subtly, but it's teased very well in that first act, because she's in that first act, she visits a gravesite and we see who the grave is for. And then we see that she is writing a letter to someone, and we're reading the letter and we're seeing that, like, okay, there's something traumatic in her past that causes her to be kind of an outcast of, either an outcast of the town or someone who is afraid of everyone in the town. And so those like little nuggets of hints of backstory are very effective at grabbing my attention and having me invested. The problem is that because the movie is depending on itself to be this dialogue-free movie, when those pieces of history in her backstory come into play in terms of that kind of classic horror aesthetic of, you know, confronting your trauma and working through your trauma and everything while in the face of horror and everything. When that comes into play, the movie, because there's no dialogue, because she's not playing off of anyone, it has to be a solely visual representation of what was in her past, how she processed that, which there are definitely creative ways that they could have communicated that visually. And the movie does work to do that. But my problem was that I was just so hung up on the fact that the movie seemed like it was trying so hard to justify carrying on this no dialogue, isolation aesthetic throughout it, that it made me just actively become more and more disinterested in whatever her backstory was, whatever her history was, because it just felt, again, like a gimmick in the pejorative sense. And it really, really bothered me, because I think that it could have been done really well, but it just wasn't, because it was so dependent on making itself be this kind of gimmicky thing. Kind of similar to like how some people get very annoyed at like one-shot movies and how that can come across as a gimmick. Kind of a similar thing here. And it just didn't. I found myself just very much disinterested in the story as it progressed throughout the movie. And it's an hour and a half long. It's not a long movie. And if I'm invested in the first half, if I'm invested in the story being told and the character's story, and then if I, like 15 minutes after that, if I'm just like kind of working to hold my attention, then I think that is a pretty big indictment against the movie. And a real shame, because I think it could have been really interesting if they had focused more on the storyline.
For sure. Yeah. I think, I agree. I think the whole, her development, again, just took a back seat to the gimmick of the movie. And that's, you shouldn't ever sacrifice something like that. Like, again, it turns the gimmick into a negative one, because you're sacrificing other parts of the creative process to follow that path, and it took away from it. Yeah, totally agree.
And it reminded me a lot of 2020's The Vast of Night. The Vast of Night, which I was a big fan of. I thought that was a fantastic movie.
Awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're very similar in the way that they are clearly drawing inspiration from classic science fiction. In particular, both are directly referencing and paying homage to The Twilight Zone, which obviously I'm a huge fan of. So, like, here they're borrowing, or they're playing with an entire like episode of the show, and they're paying homage to that in particular. The Vast of Night is doing a more just ethereal homage to The Twilight Zone. It opens with like a kind of fake intro to a fake series like The Twilight Zone, with like a Rod Serling kind of figure narrating it. And then it pays loving homage to it by like naming the town Cayuga, which is the name of the production company, the Rod Serling's production company, and the town he grew up in or something. And then it forges its own path. Like The Vast of Night is a very unique movie in the way that it is paying loving tribute to classic science fiction. Even the name of the radio station is WOTW, which stands for War of the Worlds. And like, though, that's like the clever way to do it. That's the clever and interesting way to make your own unique thing. Not everything works in that movie, but the things that do, just when it's firing on all cylinders, it's incredible. Here, we just have, it's just all homage. And then I'll talk in more detail in spoilers, but I appreciated certain aspects of the alien design, but for the most part, it just felt like the gray men from like the 50s, like that. Like it's just okay, it's the classic cliched alien forms from like the 50s, and like there's variations of them in this movie, and it's interesting the way that they do it, but I just couldn't escape the fact that like you're paying homage to a Twilight Zone episode, and then you're filling the movie with creature designs and alien tech that is conventionally it feels like it is just already just cliched representation of aliens, and it just feels it just left a sour taste in my mouth. Yeah, which I'll talk more about that in spoilers, but
that's fair. I disagree to an extent, because I think to me, I thought the alien design was, I almost want to say it was like refreshingly classic, which is maybe a bit of a misnomer, because I feel like I'm thinking of other alien movies like and this was more of an abduction as opposed to an invasion movie. I mean, it had aspects of both, but the crux of it is the abduction part, or the home invasion, as opposed to like a, alien taking over the world, which obviously that's a thing, but you know what I mean? So I think about a movie like, oh man, I'm forgetting the title. Something about Tomorrow, the Chris Pratt one that was on Amazon. That was like
the Tomorrow War, I think.
The Tomorrow War. That's it. Or like, damn, I'm blanking on the freaking title again. Tom Cruise and Emily Blunt, Die, Kill, Repeat, or whatever it's called. Live, Die, Repeat.
Edge of Tomorrow.
Edge of Tomorrow.
Yeah,
they both have tomorrow in it. Yeah.
Or
so
Live,
like those
Die,
aliens, right? Those aliens were newer, different, but kind of forgettable. Really, like they weren't. They're not going to stick in my mind, and I feel like that's what kind of happens when they try to do something new. And I'm not criticizing those, but they're just not memorable. Whereas this movie, they took the classic, like you were saying, kind of the classic skinny gray man with big eyes and a big head, and they're bald and they're not really talking. There's some telepathy and telekinesis and stuff like that. And so it's classic, but then I think they took it and really made it their own. I think the whole scene where the alien you see that it has like dexterity in its feet, and it has like, it's using its toes like fingers, where it like kind of goes along the floor like that. That was kind of fun. And then just the whole it seems like they can these aliens could they were telekinetic. They could move things and affect electricity and do that seemingly at will. Like they were almost like Jedi or something. I don't know. Like they were like superheroes. Like you could not. They were like unstoppable because they could just reach their hand out and grab you like a Jedi does in Star Wars. And that was so incredible. Like their power, and I also like how they were the alien, at least the second alien. It was reacting to the situation. Like it was trying to study her. It wasn't just one track mind focused on abducting her and getting her. Like it was kind of studying her and reacting to her. I thought that was fascinating. It saw her, all the pictures she had hanging in the room, and it's looking at the pictures and kind of studying her. And I thought that was, I don't know, it felt fresh to me. Like it took a classic template and made it its own and freshened it up a little bit. I like really respected that. Now the alien with the really long legs and it was really tall, and then kind of the mini version of that one, like there's nothing wrong with them ostensibly, but again, just kind of forgettable. They seemed like the ancillary. I don't know if that one was like a kid version or something. I don't know, but and that's not necessarily important, but the primary alien character. I
Right.
was really kind of impressed with it. Like it's probably going to stick with me. I thought it was, like I said, just kind of a classically refreshing, I guess is how I would say it. So, but I understand your criticisms though.
Mhm.
Like I totally get your reaction to it. That's understandable.
Yeah, that's totally fair. And like I said, there's some pretty good variety in the types of aliens or the different variations of them. And I really liked the first encounter with the alien, even though that in itself is also kind of feels a little bit derivative. Like there is a level of homage to like Signs when the alien is on the other side of like the refrigerator door, and that just felt like M. Night Shyamalan cosplay for a little bit. But the way that plays out is so interesting. The way that it ends, and I'll talk more in spoilers, but it's a really interesting way for the movie to hint at the backstory and hint at the trauma of the character. But that happens so early, and because of the kind of gimmick of the movie, we don't know the backstory. We don't know how that affects the character until the third act of the movie, when that's kind of unveiled a lot more and given to us again visually. Like it's not anything that's really explored with much depth. Not that there's any issue with having that be the way that that it unfolds and everything, but it does feel just very sloppy at the end of the day. So
yeah, that's fair. Yeah. Speaking of that, do you want to jump into spoilers?
Yes, absolutely. Just to reiterate, I rated it 2.5 stars. You might enjoy it. It might work better for people than it did for me, but I just kind of couldn't get past some of the issues that I had with it. Visually, it's really good, and the tension where it worked really well. But that's how I felt about it. Tiny, your rating again?
I gave it 3 stars. I kind of wanted to give it like 3.5, but I was like, I just thinking more about it. I think some of those shortcomings were a little more glaring than the creativity and uniqueness of the movie, I think. So I gave it 3 stars.
Nice. All right. Well, we are going to go into spoilers for I keep fumbling the name. No One Will Save You. So once again, it's streaming on Hulu. If you go watch it before you listen to the spoiler section, or if you want to skip over, check the show notes. If we do a potpourri section, it'll be on there. So, so we're going to go into spoilers. I'm going to play a clip from the trailer, and when we come back, we're going to be spoiling No One Will Save You. Okay, so spoilers on for No One Will Save You, and I have a couple of points that I want to bring up, and we can kind of dive into spoilers from there. First of all, a couple of things that, again, felt very dry and derivative for me was, in addition to the overall design of the aliens for me personally, in addition to that, the level of the sound design of the aliens, which you could hear a little bit in the trailer, like that kind of clicking noise, it just felt like every movie monster of the past like 10 or so years. It just felt like everything from it reminded me of like the Cloverfield monster and the aliens from A Quiet Place, just like that like guttural clicking noise. It just felt very, very reminiscent of that and not fully unique to the movie. The other major sticking point I had was, in addition to the kind of cliched character design or the cliched design of the aliens themselves, was the way that, like, yeah, the telekinesis is interesting, it's cool and everything, it's threatening, that's really interesting, but like, everything from the design of the aliens to the saucers to the tractor beam to the circles on the grass, like all of that just felt like the movie wasn't really even attempting to do anything like wholly unique with the lore of the aliens. It's like, what is the most popular way that aliens have been depicted for decades? Let's go with that. And that just kind of rubbed me the wrong way, in addition to all of my other gripes that I've said. Did you have any thoughts on that, Tiny?
Those are both totally valid points. I hadn't really thought about. I think I had such a positive reaction to the aliens. I didn't consider all the other, like you said, the crop circles or the circle on the ground, the tractor beam, the flying saucers. That's true, and I think that is a weak spot. Now that you said that, I totally agree with that. And the other part about, sorry, what was your other point? Was the
other point was the clicking noises, like the noises that they made.
Yes,
yeah,
fully agree. That was overplayed like crazy. Yeah, that was a negative on my list as well.
Yeah. And even like later in the movie, when it's revealed, like one of the more interesting aspects of it was, one of the more unique aspects of the aliens is that, like, the creepy squid-like things from the throat that go in and possess people or infect people and everything to take control of them. That's disgusting. That's interesting. That's really cool. But again, it's in competition with so many things that just aren't that interesting, that it was a chore for me to navigate my interest level of the movie, because it kept dipping and rising. Yeah. I will say though that the color design, like the cinematography of it, the blue beam, and also like the red lights from when she's like in the ship or wherever it was, like that was really interesting, and like the color palette was really interesting and doing a lot to really hold my attention.
Yeah, a lot of good visuals in the movie throughout. Yeah. Not to jump to the end, but this is something I wanted clarification on, or not necessarily the end, but so her trauma with her friend, Maud, was it Maud?
Yeah,
her friend Maud. Yeah. I don't know if I just wasn't paying close enough attention or whatever, but were we led to believe that she was in an argument with her friend and she hit her in the face with a rock and accidentally killed her? Is that what happened? That's
my understanding. It would have been great if maybe when, she goes to the police station and she sees the parents, they had some kind of expository dialogue, but there was no chance of that. But we'll get back to that in a second. But yeah, that's my understanding of it. And I like the way that the movie handles, one of my other sticking points, and something that I found kind of interesting as well, is that, and this is going to be a slight spoiler for the Twilight Zone, like the Jordan Peele produced Twilight Zone, which is apparently available on Freebie. But the Jordan Peele produced Twilight Zone, there was an episode in season 2 called A Human Face with Chris Molina and Jenna Elfman, I think. Yeah, Jenna Elfman, where the grieving couple are led to second guess what's worth leaving behind when an otherworldly encounter interrupts their move. So basically, in that episode, and stop me if this sounds familiar, Tiny, in that episode, this couple have lost a child, and aliens come and replicate that child's presence and tries to manipulate them and everything. And spoiler for that episode, but it ends with them embracing their lost child and like succumbing to the alien invasion because it brought back their loved one, a facsimile of their loved one, but in their minds, like they're not going to fight against this invasion because their grief has been kind of cured. If they allow themselves to believe that. The way that this movie ends feels like not a ripoff of that, but it feels very close to it. And it bothers me because the movie is so insistent on paying homage to the original series that it's just peculiar to me that it ends in such a way that is reminiscent of the latest Twilight Zone series. In the ending, what I'm kind of gathering from it is that Bryn, played by Caitlin Dever, she, like the aliens see her trauma or what have you, and she basically falls in line with the invasion, all of the possessed people, and she has happiness in her community again. That is all like a manufactured happiness from the aliens that are invading and taking control and everything, which just feels fine, like cool. That's neat. I was already kind of checked out by that point, but whatever. It just felt weird that it was so reminiscent of an episode of the Twilight Zone. So yeah,
interesting. I had forgotten about that episode of the newer Twilight Zone. But yeah, I mean, certainly a lot of parts of the movie were derivative. That's totally totally a valid criticism. For me, just back to the whole where she killed her friend. That should have been like, there was a part in the movie like right before that where it's the only line of actual dialogue in the movie where she is being hypnotized. I don't know, whatever you want to call it. The aliens are forcing a projection into her mind, it seems like, and she gets to essentially apologize to her friend. That should have been, that was fine, and I didn't mind it, but if they wanted to spend their dialogue on a scene, it should have been the damn fight scene where she accidentally kills her friend, because obviously the scene needed better clarification and would have been much more, that scene was not adequate to develop her character as a strictly visual scene. We needed the dialogue. Like sometimes, like the idea of no dialogue in a movie is cool, and I understand that, but dialogue, you just need it sometimes. And that scene needed dialogue. It was not clear what was going on. Like, why were they fighting? How does her friend feel? How did she really feel? That the visuals were not enough to convey those points, and they should have spent their dialogue on that scene. And I was not at all pleased with that part. Those were my least favorite parts. I didn't care for it, and it was not a very good creative choice. I didn't care for it. I mean,
same. And also, in addition to that, like we need the backstory. Like we need the full extent of the backstory, because for me, like when we see her mother's gravestone and then we see her writing a letter to Maud, and then we learn that Maud is dead and everything like that, in my brain is like, okay, that's like, it's confusing to me, because I was like, are the deaths related in some way? Because it's just like, we don't have any other information, and they're not, because, there's many years between the deaths and everything. But what I could pick up from it is that her mother was her only kind of reprieve from the grief and the quote unquote exile from the community. And like, now that her mother has died, she has no one. And that's what, like, where we find her in the movie at the beginning. That's all really interesting. I like that, but I just think that there should have been a way to explain it, at least more clearly visually, even in the early stages of the movie and throughout the movie, because on paper, it's a very interesting premise. It's a very interesting story in the way that it's communicating how everyone in town hates her, and she is ostracized from the town. And like, that's communicated wonderfully with, like, when she sees the neighbor and he kind of like, he kind of just like hisses at her essentially, and then that's doubled down. Like, was the scene that you were referring to, was that the police station scene where that's same here. I was just like, because at that point I was like, oh, okay, now we're gonna get like okay, we're about halfway through the movie and they're gonna drop the whole like dialogue thing. That was a really interesting hook for the movie, and now they're gonna do it. And then I was just so annoyed. Like, I was so annoyed because that felt so like unearned. Like, that felt less like the movie was trying to communicate that the parents still don't forgive her for what she did, or it felt less like the movie was trying to communicate that, and more like the movie was like, okay, you think they're going to talk to her, but no, we're still going to do this fun little thing, and we're going to keep it going. And like, that just felt so cheap, and it didn't work for me. I really disliked that. So, yeah.
That's funny because I had the exact same reaction.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
I was like, oh yeah, this is where they're going to have this is where the dialogue is going to drop in,
yeah,
because it needs to, and it didn't, and I was just like, okay, didn't like that, and then it was a lot more negativity from that point forward. You know, they could have made a movie where 80 to 90% of the movie is dialogue free,
right,
and had these dialogue drops, like boom, right there, would have been so effective and dramatic and shocking to have a tiny bit of back and forth just between her and those characters. And same thing with the kind of cathartic scene, or the scene where she's they're showing what happened between her and her friend. Like, you probably would have had a lot better, much more effectiveness from a creative standpoint if you had just done that, and it wouldn't have taken away the fact that you have a largely dialogue free movie and you told a bunch of the story from a strictly visual standpoint. That would have been really cool. And I just totally dropped the ball. I'm surprised that someone else didn't make that. Maybe someone else did make that note, but the note wasn't strong enough, or that person wasn't powerful enough to get him to change the movie. And that's really a shame, because I think it would have elevated it a lot.
Yeah. And like, I'll do you one better. I would have been floored if the movie was instead of the movie dropping the dialogue free gimmick at that moment, it would have been arguably more effective and more interesting if, when she goes to town, she, like, no one speaks to her, but we can overhear what people are saying about her in her vicinity. Like,
right.
That could have communicated so much more. It could have given us backstory. It could have given us this sense of surrealness to her. Like, we could have been questioning, like, is she imagining this? Is she imagining these statements? Is she imagining this reaction, or is this actual, like, things that people are saying in her presence or near her, within earshot? Like, that would have communicated everything so much better than just a strictly visual thing that they ended up doing. So I don't know.
I fully agree.
Yeah,
fully agree.
It bothered me. Yeah.
And I hadn't reacted to your points about the ending.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I thought it was sort of interesting. I didn't love it or anything, but I from a creative standpoint, I saw I understood what he was going for, what they were going for, and I thought it was kind of interesting. I didn't draw the derivative conclusion you did. Again, I had kind of forgotten about that episode of The Twilight Zone, but
I think most people did.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
But I do think that's, the character choosing to give in to their less than to a circumstance that's actually probably not good for them, or they're giving in to being deceived because of the trauma they've been through. Yeah. That's a storytelling device that we've seen before. But I think it was kind of fun or it was maybe a little bit unique because I think the aliens they made that decision in the moment. You know, they
Yeah.
were like, they saw what she had been through and chose to take pity on her, and she chose to embrace it. Like I thought it was kind of interesting. I didn't hate it, but I didn't love it either. I don't know that I'd say I respected it, but it was an interesting choice, and I didn't dislike it as much as you did.
That's fair. That's totally fair.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if I have really much else to really dive into it, so we can kind of start winding down. But any other kind of overall thoughts on the movie that we didn't touch on? Anything that we didn't touch on?
We didn't talk very much about Caitlin Dever, but she's phenomenal. She's so good. I mean, I think anyone would watch this and agree. I've seen her in so many things. She's such a good actor, and this was another great performance from her.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Her performance is fantastic with what she's given. I think that a lesser actor would have not been able to really handle the just built-in subtlety of the role. Like, this is it's a very meaty role for her. So, and I think she really nailed it. Yeah. So yeah, nothing but praise for her.
Right. She takes on trauma so well. Some other, what was the movie or the show that she was in? Oh yeah, I never saw it. Was it on? I don't know. I think I saw it on Netflix. It's called Unbelievable.
Yes.
She is that's her best performance that I've seen. She's so good in that. And then she was on a miniseries also on Hulu, I think, called Dope Sick.
I didn't know she was in that.
Keaton was kind of the star of that. She's again a very troubled, traumatized character in that as well. She nails that kind of role. So it'd be remiss if we didn't mention that.
Absolutely. And the other thing I wanted to kind of touch on really quickly was I had an experience after I finished the movie that it just bummed me out so much, because I looked at the credits and everything, and I saw that Brian Duffield made the movie. And the reason that bummed me out is that I didn't realize that he had directed it and written it and everything, because one of his previous movies in 2020 was Spontaneous, which was another movie that he wrote and directed. I believe he co-wrote it, actually, but that movie is phenomenal. Like, it's Catherine Langford and Charlie Plummer as two teenagers. I'll just read the quick plot summary from IMDb, but it's when students in their high school begin inexplicably exploding, literally, seniors Mara and Dylan struggle to survive in a world where each moment may be their last. As an unexpected romance blossoms between them, Mara and Dylan discover that when tomorrow is no longer promised, they can finally start living for today. That movie just obliterated me. That is an incredible coming of age horror movie, coming of age romance. It deals with some incredibly heavy topics like loss and not like the plot summary says, not knowing, not having tomorrow promised, and having that play out among teenagers, teenage characters who teenagers notoriously think that they can live forever. There's so much to that movie. And so going into IMDb after watching No One Will Save You, I was so bummed out, because I know that Brian Duffield is capable of making an incredibly subtle and incredibly moving and thought-provoking movie. And at the end of the day, I just feel like No One Will Save You is none of those things in the way that it could have or should have been. So it was such a bummer. Hopefully he does well with his next project, but that really bothered me, or that really bummed me out.
Okay.
So
interesting. I totally missed Spontaneous. I haven't seen that. I wasn't really familiar with it. So
yeah, I highly recommend it. I don't know if it's streaming anywhere, but definitely seek it out, because it's phenomenal. Yeah.
He wrote The Babysitter and Underwater,
Yes.
which were both I think pretty underrated movies in my opinion. I liked both of those quite a bit. So
yeah, I loved The Babysitter. We reviewed the sequel that was terrible, but that original one is really good.
Right. Yeah, that was a cool movie.
Yeah. Okay, so that's our review of No One Will Save You. Let us know what you thought about it and everything. You know where to reach us and everything. Also check out the Patreon, patreon.com/obsessiveviewer, and check the shop page on that as well. Tiny, do you want to do a quick rapid fire potpourri section to close us out?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I've just got like one thing really to bring up.
Okay, same here. So we're going to close it out with a potpourri section, which is just us talking about stuff we've watched or looking forward to, whatever smells good. It's the potpourri section. So I'll get us kicked off with just a really quick review of It Lives Inside, which is currently in theaters. It's a horror movie. An Indian American teenager struggling with her cultural identity has a falling out with her former best friend, and in the process unwittingly releases a demonic entity that grows stronger by feeding on her loneliness. I really, really wanted to enjoy this movie. I really wanted to love it, but it just felt like it was a little bit pigeonholed by its kind of cliched or rote kind of premise, which is such a shame because by having it be about an Indian American teenager, that is a unique voice. That's a unique kind of storyline to explore, and there's a lot of really good stuff with her and her parents and her relationship with her mother and everything, and the way that unfolds is really, really well done. But the biggest problem I had with it was that the demon aspect of it felt so ill-defined, and I feel like the internal logic of the demon and the rules that it had were just not clearly described. And it just felt like at one point it's like, you can, like, the demon kind of sneaks up on you, or you can see the demon, or you can't see the demon, or it kills people that tries to help you, but then it also is attacking people that aren't necessarily helping her. It just feels like it's just like kind of just a cliche, or kind of like, it just feels like it's like, okay, we need an action scene here, so let's just kind of break the rules that we already established. So I don't know. It didn't really work for me. It might work for you. It's currently in theaters. It Lives Inside. I rated it 2.5 stars on Letterboxd. So that's my potpourri. Has that been on your radar at all, or do you know anything about it?
Yeah, I thought it looked kind of cool, but
nice.
That's a shame it didn't land for you.
Yeah, of course your mileage may vary, but I wasn't too keen on it. Tiny, do you want to close us out with your potpourri section or segment?
Yeah. This will be really brief too. The Indiana State Museum, their IMAX theater was showing Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And I asked my dad if he wanted to go because I know he loves that movie, and we went to see that. It was a great experience.
Nice.
They had a really nice remaster of it. I don't think Glenn, the manager of the theater, he didn't go into any detail about the print. I don't know if it was. It had clearly been remastered. Like, it looked really good, but it seemed to fill the screen really well. I don't know if it was like 70 millimeter. I don't know what it was. I really don't. But they did a great job with the remaster. The sound especially was really good.
Oh, I didn't. For some dumb reason, I did not even consider how the sound would carry in that theater, because it's very much a sound heavy movie. That's awesome.
Totally. Yeah. So it was a great experience. We had a really good time.
Nice.
That movie, I think I was thinking about it more, and me and my dad were talking about it. Like, I saw that movie for the first time on VHS when I was probably like 8 or 9. And,
nice.
I think basically I can make the statement that movie was somewhat integral to my development as a sci-fi fan. I had
That's
seen
awesome.
at the time, you know, I famously talked about how E.T. scared the shit out of me and was a nightmare source for me for like a decade. I mean, it scared the shit out of me as a kid. And so I had sort of like a negative relationship to aliens, I guess. And to this day, it's still like the most scary thing to me. But Close Encounters of the Third Kind, when I was still in that phase, demonstrated to me that it doesn't have to be a scary thing, because that movie is just beautiful and so inspiring from an alien contact standpoint. And so it was integral to me for that reason. And you know, it was just a big part of my development as a sci-fi fan, you know. And at that point I'd seen E.T., I'd seen movies, I'd seen the Star Wars movies by that point, you know. I had seen some sci-fi stuff, but that one stands out, and it's just a really it's just a really great movie. It's like I said, inspiring. That's the word that comes to mind to me is how inspiring it is. It's memorable also because it's takes place in Indiana, in Muncie, Indiana specifically. And you know, it was really cool to see it with my dad and see it in the movie theater. I had never seen it in the movie theater, of course, and we got there, of course, a little bit early. Me and my dad were talking, and he was like, when did this come out again? I can't remember. And I was like, I want to say like 80 maybe, and we looked it up, and it was 1977. Oh,
that's right.
Yeah, and my dad was like, really, 1970? And he was like thinking back. It made my dad like get all nostalgic, because he was like,
nice.
He was like 1977. He's like, I would have like you know I would have been living in northern Indiana still. I would still have been working for Indy. I would have like just been thinking about going to work for Indiana Bell. And he's like, I know I saw this movie in the theater, but I don't remember the context of it, and I don't remember who I went with or anything. But he was like, the last time I saw this movie in the theater was 1977.
God,
and I was like,
awesome.
That's so cool that like you were there and you saw. I don't know. That was really cool to see my dad kind of go through the nostalgia of that. And he's like, yeah, I didn't even live in Indianapolis yet. He was like, I was still living up in northern Indiana where I'm from, and he's like, I think I was still working retail. I hadn't even gotten into my career yet of working for the phone company, and I was just like, wow, that's just wild to think of my dad at that time. And it was just cool, just a lot of nostalgia and great experience. Of course, the state IMAX theater did a great job, as they always do. So yeah, it's just a great experience, and I wanted to share it with everybody.
Very cool. Well, I'm super glad that you were able to do that. I think in a previous episode you talked about being excited about it, so I'm very, very happy that you were able to do it. The State Museum is going to have more interesting stuff coming up. I know that late October they're going to show The Shining. Yeah. And I don't know what else.
I know Interstellar was on the list,
right?
Which I thought about going to, but I think it was still TBD. I don't know if they ever announced if they ever D'd it.
Yeah. I don't know. State Museum.
I'll have to look it up.
Yeah, me too. But they had like, I hope that didn't, that came through. Sorry. But I don't know. It's, I was trying to discreetly find the listing of stuff that they have coming up, but I don't know. I know they showed Gladiator. I think that's already passed, but check it out. I'll try to find a link and put it in the show notes of the episode. Yeah. So Tiny, I think that about covers it. Any parting thoughts? Anything you want to say before we let the guys or let the listeners go?
No, just thanks for tuning in, everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will go ahead and start playing us out here in a moment. But I just want to say once again, if you want to check out more exclusive content without a subscription to Patreon, go to obsessiveviewer.com/Patreon and see all of the stuff we have on the Patreon shop. We have 4 immediate movie reaction packs. So all told, that is a total of like 60 some immediate movie reactions running from 2022 up until just this week. We have a couple of packs of audio commentaries. Right now I just have the Stephen King adaptation commentary. So one is commentaries for Pet Sematary, It Chapter 2, and In the Tall Grass. The other one is commentaries for Shawshank Redemption, The Shining, and Doctor Sleep. And in addition to that, we have a lot of Stephen King read-along reviews that I've done. So again, check that out, patreon.com/obsessiveviewer/shop or at obsessiveviewer.com/Patreon. I'm going to start playing us out. Once again, thank you guys so much for listening. Not sure what we're going to do next time on the show, but check it out, subscribe and all that. And check out the other shows, Tower Junkies and Anthology. Tiny, looking forward to doing this again. So thanks.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks, buddy.
Yeah. And now, enjoy this short clip from our Patreon exclusive RSS feed. For the full clip and more exclusive Patreon content, such as early access to episodes, TV, book, and movie reviews and reaction recordings, commentary tracks, and Patreon Potpourri episodes, go to patreon.com/obsessiveviewer and become a patron at the minimum rate of $1 per month. Thank you and enjoy. And I was like, I've been putting off getting my flu shot. So I'm like, hey, I want to get my flu shot. And they're like, okay, and do you also want to get your COVID booster? And I'm like, yeah, sure. Well, first I was like, is it still free? And then he was like, yeah, if your insurance covers it. I'm like, good. So I did that, and I did that on a Wednesday. And I called off work on Thursday because it just wrecked me. Like, the combination of the flu shot and the booster was I had COVID arm, which wasn't bad. But I just felt so drained and achy and diarrheal. It was.
This podcast was edited and produced by Matt Hurt and presented by ObsessiveViewer.com. You can find links to all of our shows at ObsessiveViewer.com/podcasts. For exclusive bonus content, including reviews, commentaries, and B-roll episodes, you can subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/obsessiveviewer. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.